The previous video was a preamble to this one, so if you haven't listened to it, it might be worth doing so. The next verse, 526, there's a risk of us getting philosophical. And so in the previous video, I wanted to make this as practical as possible and showed you, or hopefully gave some indication of the process that we use. And the words in this verse really apply to that process. So please listen to the previous video if you haven't done so. And let's have a look at this verse, which, as I said, seems quite philosophical, almost in a heavy-duty fashion. But there's no point. We're not interested in philosophy here. We need to be able to apply this. So let's keep that in mind. So verse 526, mind and matter are neither different nor not different from discrimination. There is no distinction of all things as they are removed from being and non-being. In the previous video, I took an empirical approach to our situation. And it's this empirical approach which leads us to liberation. We need to move from an identification with a so-called material world, a material body, to awareness itself. And awareness itself is described here as mind. Citta. Citta is the word. And citta in this context means mind with a capital M, which means the awareness that is aware of everything that's going on. And this is contrasted with matter. And matter is what attracts the attention. In the previous verses, it was described as karma. Karma is about the transmigration of the attention from pure awareness into this material world. It's driven by our basic mood energy, our mood tones, our mood habits. And in accordance with our moods, with our pattern of moods, we relate to this external world, this so-called external world, in certain ways. We discriminate certain aspects of it and use these to fuel our own personal reality. So mind is often understood as being that which does not discriminate. It's the attention at rest, not going out and being aware of objects. And matter is that which is concerned with discrimination. But this first phrase is telling us that we shouldn't really be thinking in terms of discrimination. We are not pushing the world away and finding some little space that we can bliss out in. In the previous verses on karma, we heard about the alaya. The alaya is also mind with a capital M. But it's understood as the stored consciousness. It stores the seeds of karma. Because karma, this tendency to go outwards, is actually consciousness in operation. It's what consciousness does. Consciousness projects itself outwards. So we need to not reject the projection, just appreciate that this is what consciousness is doing. We don't get caught up in the projection. The projection is the discrimination. But the second part of this verse tells us there is no distinction of all things as they are removed from being and non-being. So all things are simply part of the projection. They're part of the dream. That part of the projection is no different from that part of the projection. That might be a woman, that might be a man, but they're both projections onto the screen. There's no inherent difference in substance if you're watching this as a film being projected onto a screen. It is just a projection. We don't say the man has gone, that's non-being. There's just the woman, that's being. Because things are coming and going all the time, but it's simply the projection. So we don't make any distinction. We remove ourselves from the projection. We remove ourselves from being and non-being. And we come back to mind. So I've described matter as what attracts the attention. This is usually the translation of rupa. But we tend to think of matter as quite solid. And the idea of that matter is simply a projection might be a difficult one to get a handle on. After all, it's not just a flat projection. Well, actually it is. But we seem to have a certain freedom of movement within that projection until we encounter resistance. And that's when we start talking about matter. Matter is actually nothing more than resistance. Resistance is limitation of movement. I'm having trouble with my mobility at the moment. There's a lot of pain in my legs. That pain is resistance. Technically it's also matter, as are my moods. My moods that want to weigh me down and not engage. That is matter. That is the world of matter. These are what attract the attention, and they also constitute resistance. Resistance is the opposite of freedom. And freedom is coming back to mind, mind only. Coming back to that spaciousness which embraces everything. It embraces the moods without getting sucked into them. It can embrace pain as well, although this might take a bit of practice. On a personal note, I've noticed sometimes when my legs are particularly painful and I lie back on the bed and focus on this, not on the actual pain, but on what we might call the subtle energy body. I'm just aware of all this energy shooting through my body. Well, actually, it feels quite wonderful. It doesn't feel wonderful when I'm trying to walk. When I'm lying back, tuning into this, it feels great. So maybe there's some process going on here. So this verse really is a description of what I was talking about in the previous video, which was a practical example of enlightenment practice. In enlightenment practice, I often describe it as stepping back from the world, stepping back from our thoughts, stepping back from our moods. into pure awareness. But ultimately, in that stepping back, we embrace it all, because it's all part of the same picture. That's what's meant by mind and matter being neither different nor not different from discrimination. Discrimination is what sucks the attention into limited awareness. We discriminate a limited reality. But discrimination is also consciousness in practice, consciousness in action. So we can follow the trail back to pure consciousness.